Will you see your pets again after they've passed? Everyone loves their pets, they're a part of the family. And when they die, we grieve because we've lost a loved one, a constant companion. Hi, I'm Hayley Jones. Thanks for joining me. So with our pets, they're with us every day, a faithful companion, loving us unconditionally, and we can feel a big gap in our lives when they go. I did hear a story of a woman who dealt with this in a slightly unusual way that I hadn't heard of before. She used to buy a very particular breed of dog. I can't remember what it was, but I think it might have, let's just say it was Dalmatian. Let's say it was Dalmatian. So when her Dalmatian died, she would just simply go and buy another Dalmatian. And so she had a constant series of Dalmatians that she would buy. And I understand that this was her way of not having to grieve. She just figured, well, it's the same breed, it's effectively the same dog. It surprised me because the pets I've had have all had different personalities, but to be fair, I've never had two pets of the same breed. So I don't know how similar they are within a breed, but yeah, this is how she dealt with it. I thought that was quite an interesting story. Anyway, in a previous video, I discussed whether we see our loved ones again. Spoiler alert, I'm sure that we do, though maybe not in the way that we think. So please feel free, if you haven't seen that video, to go and watch it after this one, if that interests you. So in a similar way, I also believe that we can see our pets again, although the context is slightly different with where pets or the souls that are in pets are at in their evolutionary journey. So there are many different ideas around the reincarnation cycle. A common joke is that we hope someone we dislike or we think hasn't been very nice to us will come back as a cockroach or something else that we think is equally unsavory. So while I do believe that we can regress, I think that there are circumstances where this can happen, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. I would think that this would be the exception rather than the rule. Generally, we're moving forward, and so once we've been an animal and we become humans, we don't go back to being animals again, except for some small exceptions. There is a way of thinking that really appeals to me that I did read in a particular book, and it was talking about the idea that everything on earth is living. So all the natural things that we see or come across are living, and so if they're living, they can experience having a soul, so they can house a soul in them. So this goes from everything in the mineral kingdom through the animal kingdom and the human kingdom. So for example, you might start off life as a mineral deposit, and so it might cover, tens of square kilometers or something, or might be the whole of a mountain. And the things that you can experience in this way might be that water flows through you, or you get dug up, or you have animals making their homes through you, or insects sort of burrowing down through your mineral deposit to get somewhere else, or make their burrow, all kinds of things. Probably won't need many lives to experience all that kind of experience would have to offer, but it's obviously a completely different experience from being human. And then you might go into being a big boulder or a bunch of boulders on the side of a mountain. And you might experience the different seasons. You'll experience the sunshine on you and the rain. You'll experience erosion from the wind and the rain. You might be part of a landslide down the mountain, or a rock slide. You might get crushed by other rocks. Again, you might have animals living in you and insects crawling over you. All kinds of things. I'm sure there's plenty of things you could experience that we wouldn't even be able to imagine. But that's another possibility. And then once you've finished with the mineral kingdom, you move on to the plant kingdom. So you might be all of the grass on a savanna, for example, and just experience being all the blades of grass that are waving in the wind and feel the sunshine and so on. And you work your way through all of the different kinds of plants, so small plants, weedy plants, turning into bushes with and without flowers, and then eventually moving to trees. And you would experience different environments. So you might have a tropical environment, you might be in an Arctic environment, and then a more temperate place. You might be an olive tree in the Greek Isles, or a big pine tree in the middle of a Bavarian forest, or all kinds of different experiences you could have, and you would have birds building their nest in you, and animals living in you, and maybe experience bushfires and being rained on, and growing your branches. So once we've finished with the plant kingdom, we then move on to the animal kingdom. So we may start as a swarm of mosquitoes or a swarm of flies, and experience everything we can through that, and through different insects, because we know that just mosquitoes and flies are quite different. So other insects will have different experiences again, and where they live and what they do and how they eat and so on. So we can go through that. And then, we sort of slowly move our way up. We might then become a knot of tadpoles, and I did look that up. Knot is apparently the collective noun for tadpoles. So as this collection of, or knot of tadpoles, some of them will die very quickly, so we'll experience that. Others may last a few days, so we'll get to experience being tadpoles for a few days. And then some of them will turn into frogs, and so we'll have that whole experience as part of one incarnation effectively. But we may need to come back and do that a few times to experience it all, but perhaps in different environments or different kinds of waterways or whatever. So we move our way up, going through all kinds of animals, maybe then finally up through, say, lions and zebras and giraffes and that kind of thing, until finally we become domestic animals. So all animals tend to have a fear of humans, because we do tend to kill animals. We now farm them for their meat and so on. We go hunting, we get rid of their environment and so on. So animals do have a lot of fear of humans. Before those souls can become humans, they need to get rid of that fear, and so that's why their last incarnation is domesticated animals. And generally we would put horses, dogs and cats into that category. There may be others as well. And so the idea is that a soul, when it gets to this level, becomes two of those animals. So in one incarnation it is two horses or two dogs or two cats. That doesn't mean that those two animals die at the same time. Of course they're not going to have exactly the same lives, but it's the one soul just separated. So when you have a pet, that is an opportunity for you to help that soul on its evolutionary journey. So by loving the pet and making it feel safe, you are really helping that soul to continue. And if you have done your job well, in their next life they'll be ready to incarnate into human form. So this is different from when we talked about people. We talked about how we can have had many incarnations with people in our lives, our loved ones, many different types of relationships and so on in past lives. This may be the same with those souls that are our pets, but they won't have been humans. They will either have been our pets, or we might have come across them in a different way. So for example, perhaps the soul that is now your dog was in a previous life a lion and it killed you, and that soul perhaps wanted to atone for killing you. So in this life it's come back as your dog, so that one, it can love you, but it may have given up its life for you in this lifetime, or saved your life or something like that. Now this is getting into the realm of karma, and I haven't covered karma in any of my videos yet. We can talk about that in the future, but the idea, just very briefly, is that any interaction, probably with, you'd probably want a minimum threshold of significance to that interaction, but if there's any interaction between you and another soul, is going to generate some kind of karma, and that can be positive or negative, but we can talk about that more in a future video. I did, just as an aside, I did hear a story, would have been on one of the social media groups that I'm in on various platforms, but there was a woman shared a story of how her little daughter suddenly piped up one day and let her know that she used to be the family dog. So I thought that was a cute kind of story, but again, that was the dog becoming a human, and she chose to come into the same family. So to wrap up then, yes, I do believe that you will see your pets again once they've passed. And as for your human loved ones, when you see them in the afterlife, you'll quickly get a different perspective of them. So initially, you know, when you first pass and you see them, yes, that's your dog or your cat or your horse, and isn't that wonderful? But as you get used to what the afterlife is about, you will then start to see that soul as they are, as a soul, and understand that your relationship with them and how you've helped them to become or on their way to becoming a human, so that they can continue their evolutionary journey. And it may even well be by the time you pass that they have had a human incarnation themselves. I try to give overviews of how I think things work, but I would never claim to know it all. I talk about ideas that make sense to me, though knowing that the reality is clearly so much more complex. But I hope you've got some comfort out of what I've been talking about today. Thanks for watching. If you've made it this far and you're not yet a subscriber, it would be really great if you could subscribe to my channel. It would really help me out. And I'll see you next time.